Just Mercy is a courtroom procedural drama adapted from the 2015 New York Times bestseller of the same name. Written by Bryan Stevenson, the original book was a memoir that told the story of his experience as an attorney focused on working to appeal death row convictions. Beginning in 1989, Stevenson, played by Michael B. Jordan, is a new Harvard grad, most likely with multiple job offers on the table, but instead of launching his career at a cushy law firm, he chooses a different path. Heading south to Alabama, Stevenson establishes the Equal Justice Initiative and hangs out a shingle as a lawyer, open to working on death row cases pro bono. Just Mercy begins with one of many Black people's fears: minding your own business and being stopped by an officer, a group of police officers, in a desolate place. It seems to be a small town, and the police already know a bit about Walter McMillan, who goes by the name Johnny D, played by Jamie Foxx. It says a lot that he's stopped by a police roadblock and is questioned by one of the officers about his fancy truck and the freedom of being self-employed. The officer explains to him that he's been stopped as a result of being wanted in connection with the murder. He's encouraged by the officer to give in to his impulse to run away so the officers on the scene can avoid the pretense of a trial and kill him right there. From his very first contact with the police, it's presumed that Johnny D is guilty rather than innocent. Granted, in real life I'm sure there was some time between the two, but in Just Mercy, Johnny D is arrested in one scene, and the media is discussing his conviction in the next. The story is not told from the perspective of law enforcement, but we don't get even a basic explanation of the investigation as far as how the police found witnesses and tried to confirm or disprove their stories. And there's little information about the victim, how she was murdered, the scene of the crime, etc. I think that plays into the point of Just Mercy. In a situation where someone is facing the penalty of death, often the bare minimum is done to investigate the crime of which he's accused. With the suspect already in mind, the focus is on getting a conviction, not on ensuring that justice is served by getting the person who actually committed the crime. So the minuscule facts that exist are molded to fit the story the police and prosecution want to tell. And where facts and evidence don't exist, they're created in the form of questionable witness testimonies. This is a travesty, but this is also part of the reason why the accused is allowed to have a defense attorney. The defense attorney is supposed to represent the interests of the accused and ensure they receive a fair trial in the face of the prosecution mounted against them. Yet, too often, the possibility of receiving a vigorous defense is heavily dependent upon the accused's ability to pay for it. When we first see Stevenson, he's still an intern and has been tasked with visiting an inmate on death row to let him know that he's at low risk for being executed within the next year. This is a joyful moment for the inmate, as he will now allow his family to visit, but it made me uncomfortable. As human beings, we all know that we're born and will die at some point. It's the one certainty in life. But the vast majority of us don't know the exact day and time. I couldn't imagine the stress of waiting on an appointment date and time for the end of my life, and being told at intervals that I'd be allowed to live for another few days or another few months or another year or, whatever time period. Stevenson and the inmate appear to be around the same age. I'm guessing at this point probably in their mid-20s or so. After getting the heavy subject out of the way, the two chat for a while and realize that they have quite a bit in common. They were both raised in the church and had similar upbringings, but life just went differently for them. Stevenson realizes that under different circumstances, he could have been sitting on death row instead of studying at Harvard. Upon arriving in Alabama, Stevenson's first obstacle is losing the office that had been procured due to the landlord having fears of criminals being on the premises. The second obstacle is now having to operate within the area's highly problematic legal system. Prisoners aren't the only ones that the system attempts to strip of their dignity. Thus, defense attorneys are also asked to endure hostile treatment and degradation for having the gall to go against the system. This ignores the fact that their role in the system is supposed to be to push back against the prosecution and poke holes in weak areas of their case. It says a lot about how things were probably operating for quite some time in this area. That providing a client with a strong defense it's not regarded as doing your job, but instead it's seen as being difficult or combative. The police and prosecutors expect the defense to sit idly by and allow clients to be railroaded, if not aiding in their demise. During his visits with multiple clients, we see a montage of men who have experienced poor legal representation, and that's poor in terms of both the defendant's ability to pay and the quality of the legal work. The lack of value placed on human lives is evident, given the stories of lackluster defenses that some of these individuals share. By the time Stevenson and Johnny D meet, Johnny D has just about given up and lost hope. Lawyers have come and gone, who've made promises of helping him obtain his freedom, and he speaks about the hopelessness of trying to get justice, but also of just being a black man in Alabama. Johnny D feels like you're considered guilty or presumed capable of committing crimes from the moment you're born. And all it takes is for someone to decide that your time is up and your life can be torn apart. Amid that chaos, you have little control or the possibility of being heard or treated fairly. Something that strikes me about stories like this is the veneer of genteel that masks danger. Everybody in town is so proud of the fact that this is where Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, and everyone he speaks to encourages Stevenson to visit the Mockingbird Museum. Like, honestly, it's kind of ridiculous at a point. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great book, but it seems like few of these people have read the book, or at least they completely missed its themes. It's nice to see that Johnny D still has his family and community around to support him. When a lot of people go to jail, they lose contact with and support from many of the people in their lives beyond their immediate families, if that. And Johnny D's case was built on the questionable testimony of one man, which we get to find from speaking to his community or seeing his community speak. But we see that multiple people were willing to provide an alibi that he was elsewhere at the time of the crime. Yet the police did not investigate their claims or felt that they were insignificant and thus not worthy of consideration. The issue with Johnny D seems to be that he was perceived as being out of pocket for a black man. He's self-employed, doing well financially, and also previously had an affair with a white woman. All of these things seem to stack the cards against him and has created hatred for him within the local white community. Some of the most powerful scenes are those that take place between Johnny D and the other men on death row. There's the question of what consideration mental illness should be given when an individual commits a crime, and also about the frequency with which it seems the focus of investigations is to arrest and put someone in jail rather than finding who committed the crime. Also, trying to do what's right by not providing false testimony can result in harassment and vindictive behavior from the police. The stories told within Just Mercy are compelling. Not entirely new, as I'm sure we've all heard similar stories before, but compelling nonetheless. Yet, I found parts of the movie lack the emotion and passion that should be coursing through such a story. And quite honestly, early in the movie especially, Stevenson feels a bit flat. I first became aware of Bryan Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative around the opening of the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. Since then, I've seen interviews and also watched a documentary about his work. And while he indeed is not mopey or aggressively angry, it's still easy to see and feel his passion for his work. But for whatever reason, I just didn't feel that passion come through here. I couldn't quite put my finger on if it was the script or Jordan's acting, but something just felt off to me. But I felt that tension and emotion with the men on death row. It might just be that the emotions are so heavy in the scenes with the men on death row that they overpower the other parts of Just Mercy. We usually hear about death row from the perspective of everyone but the condemned, because, an executed person can't tell you what it's like to prepare and walk into the death chamber. It's heavy to see and to know that a person is headed to death, and I will readily admit that I'm not in favor of the death penalty under any circumstances. And I get that this is a movie, but I'm not ashamed to say that the scenes regarding the execution of a prisoner, took me out. Based on the theater where I watched Just Mercy, I wasn't the only one. Everyone else also became quiet, and you could hear people, myself included, sniffling. Early in the film, I felt like Stevenson's flatness was a flaw, because he wasn't as compelling as some of the other characters. As the star of Just Mercy, I expected Michael B. Jordan to take up more space in the story. But in some ways, having Stevenson be more subdued allows the emotions of the men he represents to be more prominent. He becomes like a blank canvas used to better tell their stories. To be clear, not everyone on death row is innocent, but I think Just Mercy does a great job of making us think and realize that we shouldn't ignore the humanity of the condemned or the possibility of innocent people ending up on death row. Johnny D makes a point in Just Mercy along the lines of his personal experience being upsetting, but also confusing and frustrating when dealing with his kids. As a parent, part of your responsibilities are to teach your children right from wrong and to encourage them to stay on the right path. But what do you tell your kids about being good and staying out of trouble when you experienced and they see that you can do the right things and still find yourself in prison? It's like walking a tightrope made of razor wire, where if you fall off, you face immense trouble and danger, but trying to stay on while maintaining your balance will result in getting your feet cut to shreds. It's like, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. With Johnny D, we see a man who has made some mistakes in life, but none that should warrant the loss of his life. He's lived a regular life where he wasn't involved in illegal activities. Johnny D understands how the local social society works and mostly operated within its bounds. But the one time he stepped out of line, it caused his life to be blown apart. Part of why there's so much focus on death row exonerations is that the system works differently for those condemned to die. It can take years, decades even, for someone to receive an execution date because of the appeals process. Also, there are more pro bono legal resources provided for people on death row versus those who are just facing time in prison. It's terrible that innocent people have been placed on death row, which is a mental prison within a physical prison, and some have spent years there, only to be later exonerated. With the death penalty off the table, the appeals process is different, and fewer pro bono resources are available to defendants. So just imagine the potential amount of innocent people who have served sentences life sentences or any other kinds of sentences besides death, simply because they didn't have like a built-in appeal process available to them or, pro bono resources to re-examine their cases. I don't think that anyone believes the justice system is infallible, but if we as a society are going to condemn people to such a permanent punishment as death, the system must be flawless. There should be no acceptable margin for error. We must be able to ensure that there's no bias, and the system will get it right every time for everyone, regardless of race, income, lifestyle, etc. And even then, we should question the effectiveness of allowing our morals as a society to be compromised by the emotional response of seeking revenge and retribution through legal means. I was looking forward to Just Mercy, as over the last few years I've become a fan of Bryan Stevenson, and I still hold Stevenson in high regard, but I hope that this won't be the only movie made about him, or at least that more movies are made about the people he has defended. I didn't have any definitive expectations or preconceived notions about Just Mercy, so I wasn't pleasantly surprised or disappointed. I just thought it was a good, but not amazing movie. Jamie Foxx was good, and Rob Morgan was amazing as Herbert Richardson, one of the other prisoners. I didn't care much for O'Shea Jackson Jr. as Anthony Ray Hinton, not because he was bad, but because in part I thought he sounded like he was from LA rather than the South, and also because we didn't get much of Hinton's story. While the name sounded familiar, I didn't even pick up on who he was supposed to be until the end of the movie. It felt like because there were so many complex stories to be told, some of them weren't given enough space. I read an interview about the making of the movie where one of the creators discussed having to cut out some of the storylines to get the movie closer to a 2-hour runtime. And I'd be curious to see if there's an extended director's cut when the movie's released on DVD, and if with more context the characters feel more fleshed out. Living in the golden age of television and streaming, I feel like Just Mercy would have been better off as a miniseries on HBO or Netflix. It would have allowed each of Stevenson's client stories to be told either within an episode or across the season. Like, they just needed more time. and we would have been able to see more of Stevenson's development as a man and as a lawyer. Cutting back on the details results in some of the characters feeling dull, like just flat and not nearly as complex as they should be. But at the same time, were the flaws due to the actors or the script? For example, neither Herbert Richardson or Ralph Myers are on screen for huge amounts of time, but the characters have some of the most emotionally impactful scenes. I started out hating Myers, played by Tim Blake Nelson, the false eyewitness who testified against Johnny D, until the movie got deeper into his story. I didn't like Myers, but he at least elicited some kind of reaction and was engaging throughout all of the scenes. Both characters eventually drew me in, and I felt compassion for them. There should have been something there to draw you into Stevenson and Hinton as well. Now, I still recommend seeing Just Mercy while it's in theaters, preferably with a group of friends and grabbing dinner or drinks afterwards to discuss. But for a more comprehensive film about Bryan Stevenson and his work through the Equal Justice Initiative, I'd also highly recommend checking out the 2019 documentary, True Justice, Bryan Stevenson's Fight for Equality. And if you're ever in Montgomery, Alabama, make a visit to the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice for a more immersive experience and explanation of the peculiar history of capital punishment and the Equal Justice Initiative's role in trying to do away with it. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please click the thumbs up button and share it online. I hope you'll also subscribe to the channel and return for future episodes to get motivated, get inspired, and get stories of Black history made and in the making. Until next time, take care. For show notes, visit noirhistoire.com via the link in the episode description. While you're there, subscribe to the Noir Histoire newsletter to get fresh content delivered straight to your email inbox. You can also shop for Noir Histoire merchandise and accessories. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.